And now, presenting the Sol Taishoff Award for Excellence in Broadcast Journalism, CNN's Wolf Blitzer.
And the recipient of this award back in 2013. He forgot to mention that. It is truly my pleasure to join all of you tonight in honoring CNN's chief international anchor, Christiane Amanpour. Give her a big round of applause. She's a very special journalist and a very special person. I have known her and worked very closely with her for several decades, and she is truly, truly amazing. And as so many of you know, Christiane has often risked her life to go to war zones and report the news. She has always done so with accuracy and honesty. That was certainly true when she reported on Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait back in 1990 and the first Gulf War that followed. Together with our other war correspondents, including Bernard Shaw, John Holloman, and Peter Arnett, Christiane helped put CNN on the world map. People all over the world were watching our special breaking news coverage, and she was truly brilliant, launching her extraordinary career as a war correspondent. Christiane soon followed up with her very courageous coverage of the Bosnian War, and it didn't stop there. Indeed, to this very day, we can always count on Christiane to let the world know what's going on. She is not afraid to tell the truth, even when it's painful, and we are all so grateful to her. Christiane is in a very special class of journalists who are dedicated to telling the world what's really going on, and she does. She has received over the years numerous awards, and they are all so well-deserved. And this is yet another very special honor. On behalf of all of us, congratulations, Christiane, and thank you for all you've done and are still doing to keep the world informed. Let's hope it continues for many years to come. Christiane Amanpour.
Thank you. It's so nice of you. Thank you so much, Mr. 2013, for coming here and being so gracious. Thank you to the NPF for this. I'm really very honored and delighted. Thank you to my fabulous friends, colleagues at CNN. I do actually owe it all to CNN, and I do feel that I grew up with CNN, which in June will be 45 years old, and has changed the world, in my opinion, for the better. So let's start with what's happening now. Listen, I started this new year thinking that I'm gonna have a great reset. I went for a lovely sunny holiday. I came back, I found some words of advice from friends on how to sort of comport yourself when all around you is going to hell. So one of these friends sent me her advice called the glimmer theory. I don't know whether it's an actual theory, but the idea is to recognize and focus on those moments in your day that make you feel joy, happiness, peace, gratitude. Then there was another friend who sent me a lovely, kind message, and I commented to her on it. And she said that her New Year's resolution is to say nice things whenever she thinks of nice things. So I was really grateful. I felt wonderful. I tried. I really, really tried. But these last few weeks have been trying. They've been testing. Suddenly I find myself suited and booted again in my warrior queen armor. As a journalist, as a person, as a member of a community that I actually want to belong to. The breakneck speed at which the current executive is slashing and burning at home and abroad, trying to create a truly new world order is unprecedented. Over here, I've heard it said that you are teetering on the verge of a constitutional crisis as the executive tests the absolute limits of his power. It's alarming to watch how speedily and with little apparent effort, democratic and cultural institutions are being discarded, including by an unelected oligarch class. Who can tell whether any, all, or none of this new foreign policy is posturing? We'll see, but I've returned from the front lines to give you a report. If only you had been in Munich last weekend to hear an American vice president lecturing and scolding his stalwart allies, while at the same time America, in the words of a former British prime minister, officially cuddles with Vladimir Putin. The German defense minister in the audience for this address actually heckled Vance. He heckled the interference on behalf of the extreme far right in Germany, who espoused some Nazi ideas. He called that unacceptable. America this week, officially, at least from the president's mouth, has unilaterally changed the truth, berating Ukraine and President Zelensky for starting the war and calling him the dictator. I can only hope that this will calm down. And note that the US intelligence sees, quote, zero evidence that Putin is ready to negotiate on anything other than his own maximalist goals. This senior European leader, the Prime Minister of Britain, former Prime Minister, warns of an unprecedented world realigning moment where democracy and our whole way of life is under threat. He, Sir John Major, who right after Munich said, I really go on the media, but sometimes there are things that need to be said that can't be said by current governments, but perhaps need to be said anyway. He went on, if America does not stand by its allies in the way it has for the past 80 years, we are leading and heading towards an extremely dangerous world. And he said, it's hard to understand why. This is what is really confusing and befuddling certainly your allies and potentially delighting your adversaries. Major quoted President George H.W. Bush, with whom he helped fight the first Gulf War that Wolf alluded to there. He said, for every action there is a reaction. In other words, if America steps back, somebody will step forward and replace them. In this case, he said, he warned that if Putin is allowed to win and win that territory that he illegally invaded Ukraine for, and he warned that China would be watching, potentially with what they might do to Taiwan. And he said that Putin and Xi, quote, are now dancing with joy. This is not something that we should be taking any comfort in, because when America's adversaries are dancing with joy, it means they want to see an American leader who could make America weaker. This is where we are right now. My story, look, I was brought up and lived much of my life in monarchies, revolutions, and authoritarian environments. As a child and as a young adult growing up in Iran, and later as a journalist covering these situations, I always got to watch the king cause otherwise smart, intelligent, educated, strong, rich, moral people laugh at even his silliest jokes, bend to his bullying, and exhaust all manner of obsequiousness before realizing too late that they'd lost their soul and that the king couldn't care less anyway. He hadn't lost any of his contempt for any of them. I've reported this as illiberalism creeps from the far eastern edges of Europe to the very center, and we're witnessing it now land as far west as here. The press, and of course, Edward R. Murrow, and I want to read his fantastic quote here. He warned in a very, very crucial time when he stood up against a very ugly manifestation, McCarthyism. He talked about television and the birth of television. He said, this instrument can teach, it can illuminate, yes, and it can even inspire. But it can do so only to the extent that humans are determined to use it to those ends. Otherwise, it's nothing but wires and lights in a box. There is a great and perhaps decisive battle to be fought against ignorance, intolerance, and indifference. And that's where we come in. It is time, of course, my friends, we have to remain up to this task. We can't be exhausted. We can't shrug. We can't allow ourselves to be overwhelmed. I note a recent article in the New York Times about previous anti-press presidents. After President Nixon's re-election in 1972, and amid the Washington Post's remarkable investigative reporting on Watergate, they challenged TV licenses owned by the Washington Post company, as well as a whole load of other pressure. The article quotes the Washington Post publisher, Katharine Graham, from her memoir, when she said, "The administration's power and anger were at their greatest after the landslide election, and we were at our weakest. We were scared." I understand that. It is scary. It is scary talking truth to power. It's scary going to war zones to report, for instance. But I agree now with the CPJ, who says that we must defend ourselves against, for instance, retaliatory lawsuits, punitive action by the FCC, targeted attacks against individual journalists and news organizations. I may be Pollyanna, but from my experience in war zones, where I believe teams matter and communities need to stick together in order to survive, I believe an attack on one should be treated as an attack on all. It's unacceptable for AP to be banned from the White House, or any of us. Any news organizations to be kicked out of legacy positions and institutions where they're able to cover and hold power accountable. But luckily, I read that many of our news organizations, including those sympathetic to the current administration and whom the current administration favors, have written to the White House to make the case for AP. And I do hope that that is fixed and AP can go back. I wonder also whether leaders from all our organizations can band together and devise a joint legal or other kind of defense strategy for all of us. This is the only nation where the press has a constitutional right. It's the law, and if we don't uphold or defend it, who will? And I hate to bring up the usual suspects, and I know it's an eye roll and a turn off, but the first acts of Nazism, of Mussolini's fascism, and many dictatorships, autocracies, and illiberal democracies, the first acts begin with the systematic destruction of the free and the independent press, and the deliberate intimidating and silencing of the uncomfortable truth. And in case you want a roadmap for that, I don't point you to China or to Russia, etc., but to Orban's Hungary and to all of those, even in Europe, who are eating at the edges of the free press that is a vital part of any thriving democracy. Also, as we know, the USAID money that is given for humanitarian, of course, it's also given to many of these countries to help a free press in their countries when all they have is state-controlled press. And I think that certainly many of these countries will be celebrating because it will have significant repercussions denying those funds for them for a free press globally. And again, I really thank CNN and I thank Ted Turner for creating CNN and particularly for developing CNN International as a way to give people around the world, and that was in 1985 when he took CNN International, to give people in state-run autocracies especially an alternative that's truthful, that really can get at the facts and tell them when all they had was their state-run media organizations, and you know how that goes. So I want to thank you all, and I just want to end with the title of this one book. It's written about something completely different, but I want to just hold this up and show it to you. It says, "One day, everyone will always have been against this." The full title, "One day, when it's safe, when there's no personal downside to calling a thing what it is, when it's too late to hold anyone accountable, everyone will always have been against this." Thank you all so much.
And I'll leave you with these words, Christiane. I'm Wolf Blitzer, and you're in the Situation Room.
Because it's all about you, Wolf, and I love you.
Because whatever room I'm in, there's a situation, and there's a great situation with Christiane going on right now.